I'm so glad you're here. This is a replay of a live training I did inside the OTs for Pelvic Health Facebook group with Lindsey Vestal, and I wanted to make sure that everyone gets access to it. Pelvic health is such an incredibly fulfilling specialty, and it's growing so much. I've been training OT since 2018, and my goal is to have over 10,000 OTs trained by the year 2030. I'm so glad you're here learning about this specialty. I hope that you can join us in the OTs for Pelvic Health Facebook group with me, Lindsey Vestal. I will link to the group below in the show notes and description. Thank you so much.
All right, welcome to our weekly OT Empower Hour. Today's topic, it hits home. This is such a good topic this morning. So our topic today is called Being an OT in a PT World, Following Your Authentic Voice Despite Your Inner Critic. And I'm joined by the lovely Amanda DeLorme, who we're going to be rolling up our sleeves and talking about this today. Amanda, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. Lexi's joining us. She says she's so happy to be here too. Yeah, this is a topic that I feel like is a perennial topic. I feel like we could revisit this one over and over again. And it was a hot topic at our recent AOTA national conference. So while I am sort of thinking about it in context of that, it's one of those ones that I think is really evergreen in our community. So I really couldn't think of anyone better to have on here, Amanda, to talk about this. I want to give a little bit of a background about you, and then we will do our icebreaker question, and then we're going to roll right into our conversation, which I'm just so thrilled about. So Amanda is a pelvic floor therapist. She's also a yoga teacher. She's a holistic health coach, and she specializes in helping women heal wound trauma and pelvic and core dysfunction through her very integrative approach to healing. She believes each woman holds an innate wisdom within their womb and pelvic space that needs tending to, needs support in order to thrive and live with greater vitality. Amanda, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, such a pleasure to be here. It's an honor, truly.
So I've got some questions that I'm excited to ask you about, but as usual with these OT Empower Hours, Lexi, I know you're here joining us. Anyone joining us, let us know you're here by answering our icebreaker question. It really does jazz Amanda and I up. It also allows, it lets us know you're here, because otherwise Facebook, it's got this little mysterious algorithm going on. And so it definitely fires us up to know you're here. So Amanda, I'm going to start with asking you the icebreaker question, and then I'll invite the audience, whether live or on replay, to answer the question as well. I would love to know, what are you reading right now, Amanda?
Great question. A list of books, but the current play on my Audible is an autobiography of a yogi.
Ooh, I have that one. It's an orange book, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's 17 hours on Audible, so I'm in it for the long haul. But the text so far is good.
Awesome. I'm going to put this in here. Actually, I have that book. It's bright orange. I haven't read it yet, but I love that you're doing an Audible. Do you do most of your books on Audible?
I do. I think later in life I've learned I'm an auditory learner, or I take it in, I drive a decent amount, so it's also a nice way to kind of get reading in. Otherwise I fall asleep at nighttime way too early.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. I love it too. I also realized that about myself when I started listening to podcasts. Yeah, I was like, wow, this is like such a fantastic way. And walking around New York City there, and in the subway, there was just so much downtime, and having my earbuds in my ear was just like, I had this constant companion of lifelong learning. So I love that. I love that you read your books that way. All right, Lexi, let us know what you're reading. Everyone else joining us live or on replay, we want to hear from you. What are you currently reading? Or maybe what you're hoping to read, like what's on your nightstand, right? Like we all are sometimes I'm in that moment right now where I just finished a book and I'm like, all right, which one should I pick up next? So Janet is joining us. She says The Girl with Seven Names. Ooh, is that fiction, Janet? That sounds great. Joanna is joining us. She says, hi, Lindsey and Amanda. I'm reading The Deepest Well by Nadine Burke Harris and loving it. That sounds incredible. I'm going to look that. So actually, Amanda and I crafted this question together, and we were like, we're going to go through afterwards and look up all of the books that are coming in, because summer's coming, right? We've got to add to our reading list. So keep them coming in. Lexi said she's finally getting around to The Body Keeps the Score. Awesome. That's fantastic. I'm looking down because there's another book here. Lexi, I have this ongoing thing where I keep trying to finish The Body Keeps a Score, and it's been a bit of a challenge for me, but I finished this one recently. It's called In an Unspoken Voice by Peter Levine. And it's very story based. So I found it to be a little bit easier to go through. I've actually read it twice now. So just throwing that one out there, since I don't have a current read to suggest. Joanna said she totally connected to the deepest well. Fantastic. Awesome. All right. I'm so happy so many people are joining us. Keep the book recommendations coming in, because Amanda and I are loving that. We're going to kick off our conversation today, Amanda. And, you were an OT Pioneer alumni, and you opened up your private practice, guided actually by my husband with his course called Private Pay MBA. And you are doing incredible things. I am just blown away. And I'd love to know if you could kind of look back at your former self, I don't know, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, with the momentum you have going now, what would you share with your former self?
It's a good one. Yeah. It's funny how we can always give it out, right, as therapists, and it's always hard to kind of recognize that within ourselves. So it's really nice to be invited to look back. So, I think always tenderness and grace, really just acknowledging where we've come from, right? I think probably across the line as therapists, right? We are usually selfless and things like that. So honoring myself and where I've come from. Yeah. And I would tell that to all my, fellow OTs or to my clients. So, I would congratulate myself and say, like, wow, like you put the hard work in despite that inner critic, despite the hardship, despite what everyone else kind of said, and despite even the current inner thoughts that go through that kind of, land in the court of self-doubt or fear or, unworthiness, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when I read a little bit about you at the start, we learned a little bit about your practice and sort of, where your philosophy lies and, the values that you really anchor back into. Can you tell us a little bit more about your practice? Like maybe a portrayal of some clients that you're seeing, or maybe like an ideal client that you would be seeing in your practice?
Yeah, I seem to be getting a lot of individuals with pelvic pain. And so it seems like my practice focuses a lot more on sort of that somatic or, releasing trauma kind of embodiment, or empowering individuals to sort of live with their body more fully, if you will. So my ideal client tends to be an individual who has pelvic pain that is not really sure where it came from or what it is, yet that's kind of manifesting in some pelvic symptoms. And so I take a really gentle approach. I do a lot of craniosacral therapy, a lot of coaching, education, mindfulness is a big piece, awareness. It's really subtle. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And, we settled on this topic today of sort of this inner critic. Do you feel like that's something that's kind of a soundtrack in your own life?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, right. Those limiting beliefs that earlier versions of ourselves, for whatever reason, whatever our upbringing was, whatever society's told us, right? We all kind of have those stories, and I can see the threads, right, that would tell me the reasons why not. And yet, despite that, I've felt very passionate to continue going forward with support, right? So that's where I've had support from other women who've really, coached me through those inner thoughts of doubt, if you will. So now I feel joy and pleasure in kind of supporting women more along the lines of pelvic health, but kind of, those inner stories that maybe prevent them from their greatest version of themselves.
In your experience, Amanda, do you think that those voices go away?
No, No. I mean, I have a yogic background, and even like the autobiography of a yogi, as I kind of shared, right? It's like, the experience of being human, I always think that, or I had thought that like they'll go away, right? This practice of yoga, this practice of mindfulness, this practice of doing will shed this. And yes, I think there's a degree of that, but ultimately, really, it's just kind of learning to live with it. I mean, not in like a learning to live with it, but learning ways that you can like live harmonious with it, right?
Yeah.
And you've talked a lot about it, and it's come up a lot, I think, is that kind of imposter syndrome, and, naming it's really nice, I think. And then acknowledging that inner voice, but kind of really sitting more with what's true, right? And kind of filtering that out, like what's true. What's true to move forward is to, do my work in the world, which I have found to be with women in pelvic health.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree so much with something you had shared with me, which is doing it scared, right? So you had shared with me that you feel like you really kind of walk the fear piece, but show up anyway. And sometimes we have to do it scared. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Maybe for someone who's listening who, is still on that side of not sure if they could do it. What are some thoughts you would share with that OT who isn't sure?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like you open the call and, I'm talking to my earlier self. Like I didn't think I could do it, right? And, there's those great pictures out there that show the staircase, right? That's like one step at a time, right? It's not that huge like leap to the top, right? And I don't think if you'd asked me 6 months ago or a year ago, would I be here, right? It's like that, like just looking at that next step forward. So I think it can get overwhelming if we really look at the big picture. And so just kind of to the OTs out there, taking that next step forward, just kind of follow that call, that breadcrumb, that little nudge that's showing you that next step. Maybe it's a course, maybe it's speaking to another person, maybe it's a book, or whatever the thing is. I think just taking that next right step can be helpful.
Yeah, there's so much about action, isn't there? That sometimes we can, like, I definitely am capable of analysis paralysis, where, I can kind of stew in my thoughts and wonder, there's 5 opportunities, there's 5 options in front of me. And instead of maybe picking one or reflecting on one, really maybe thinking about doing none of them because I'm not sure. And so what I hear you saying, Amanda, is perhaps like, pick the one that either maybe intuitively calls you the most or feels the most doable, the most easeful, and just starting with that. It could be picking up that book. It could be calling someone in our group and saying, tell me how you got started. Like, what was your journey like? It could be joining our newly appointed community of practice through the AOTA, which is all about pelvic health, right? There's so many options. Listening to a great podcast, going through this beautiful list of books that, okay, so Doug's joining us. Hey, Doug, he's saying A Beautiful Constraint by Adam Morgan and Mark Barden. It's how to transform your limitations into advantages and why it's everyone's business. So going through this list of books that everyone's sharing, looks like Lexi has Peter Levine on her list. Tiffany said the book Body Keeps the Score is great on Audible, right? So maybe picking one of these books today on this list that's really calling you. And then Amanda, tell me if this is an experience that you can relate to. In my own journey, picking one step kind of fuels me and energizes me to then pick that next step. And then, as you said, it's not that jump from step one to the end. It's these little steps that kind of give us that momentum. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I think we can get overwhelmed, and those parts of ourselves that don't think we can do it, they might wrap up and say like, oh, nope, I can't go that far. I'm just going to quit. Right. And I think it's listening to that little tiny quiet whisper, right? And following that. And in despite or in communion with maybe the voice that's saying don't, or the part of yourself that feels scared. I mean, case in point, I don't love speaking publicly, but I just felt really called to talk today, so I'm just going to go forward with it, right? Despite the sort of heart racing or like discomfort that one might feel. And I think we talked about this last time when we chatted, but it's like, if we reflect that back to the clients that are walking into our office, right? Pelvic health is a very vulnerable piece. And so, it's for most people bravery to walk in our doors and ask for that help. So they too are experiencing probably that inner voice that, maybe they shouldn't prioritize themselves, or maybe, they're not worthy to receive that kind of care, whatever those stories are for them. I think reminding ourselves that, it's the path that we're walking is also a path similar that our clients may be walking.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that you're nervous, that this conversation is a challenging one and you're doing it anyway. So it's another example of sort of that motto that you have really embraced, which is, walking the fear and doing it anyway. And I also really appreciate you bringing it back to our clients, because you're absolutely right. Many of them are walking in so unsure, so nervous, feeling so alone. They're the only one with this experience. And so kind of anchoring back that this is really a shared human experience, and so many facets can keep us moving forward. And, we just had our graduation call for my latest cohort of OT pioneers. And one of the things we talked about was this idea that if you don't get out there and see clients, you're the world's best kept secret. Right? And they need us. Yeah. It doesn't always have to be the public speaking forums that we're challenging ourselves to, but it's these one-on-ones, right? Sitting with our clients and really holding space for them could be that next courageous step that really fuels you and gets you set going on that journey.
Yeah, one of my teachers had shared, and perfection really comes into this piece, I think, is like this idea of perfectionism. And I'm, a recovering perfectionist. And it's like, if we wait for it to be perfect, then we'll never help that individual, or we'll never really give opportunity for our fullest expression of ourselves. Right. And so again, I think it's just knowing those patterns and calling forth, I don't know, maybe the harder parts of ourselves, I guess.
Yeah. The harder parts of ourselves that then flourish and start to grow when we give them a little bit of time and compassion.
Totally. Yeah.
So I know, Susan, hey, you're joining us. If anyone has any questions for Amanda, go ahead and throw them in the comments. She's an active member of our group. So if the questions come in later on replay, fantastic. But if you're joining us now, we'd love to hear if there's any questions or comments or experiences you'd like to share. Amanda, I'd love to ask you another question as we're waiting to see if any more come in, which is, how much internal work are you doing in your practice?
So I'm actually not doing that much. It's kind of a beautiful story. It's funny how the universe kind of shows you, like, I don't know, how you're supposed to practice or the type of clientele, and I was working for another company before opening my own practice, and it was an insurance-based company, and it was a really great learning space, but I kind of knew that it wasn't for me forever. And I had one client come and significant history of trauma, and we did some internal work there, but there was this really big turning point in my practice that was like, wow, I think that actually she didn't need internal work, and she would have probably, maybe, or at least this is my reflection back, is like, I think if we had started with something a little bit more gentle, there might have been a better outcome. Now, of course, what do they say? Hindsight's 2020, but it was a learning curve for me to be like, wow, I want to start practicing more gently, externally. And I guess this is where I'm still in it, to really have like a firm belief, but I'm curious, and maybe I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this as well. But, I really am intrigued by autonomy, right? And so I want individuals to feel empowered in their own body. And so there's this question that I have that I'm kind of toying with, is like, does internal work create that sense of autonomy, right? If there's another practitioner doing unto someone, right, does that then take away that kind of voice that they're trying to seek, right? If they're an individual who's had their voice, their power taken away for years for, reasons, right? So that's where I'm in my practice. There's not that much that I do internally, but I feel like I have a lot of individuals that are coming to me with more significant trauma.
Yeah. So we've got some wonderful people joining us. I'd love to open that question up, that discussion up. I'd love to hear Lexi, Susan, love to hear what you think. Tiffany, if you're still joining us, Janet, Joanna, let us know your thoughts on this. While we're waiting, I'll share some of my perspective, because this is something I think deeply about and have for many years. Oddly enough, we had an anonymous post just moments before our talk, Amanda, from an OT student who I was asking, what are ways we can practice if we're not doing hands-on work? And so I'm going to extrapolate this a little bit further and go more specific and say internal work. And, when I first got started, I had a lot of PT mentors. There weren't a lot of OTs doing this work. And I really, showed up initially as a PT, really feeling like I needed to do that work that I saw, that was represented to me, that was shown to me. And I felt at such a disconnect. I really felt like I was a salmon swimming upstream. I felt at a loss for this calling that I had so deeply inside me that was now a disconnect for me. And I was very reflective on this and take a step back and started to do a little bit more OT-led work, focusing more on occupations, focusing a little bit more on what mattered to that client and not immediately rushing to that gold standard that I was told I needed to do in that first evaluation. And as I started slowly stepping into this, oh my gosh, I lit up. I felt that passion again that I'd felt when I first discovered pelvic health and that I fought to get into. And my clients were getting better faster, right? So I share this a lot, both through my emails and my podcast, and even this forum, is that the longer I'm a pelvic floor therapist, the less internal work I do. And I think it's because I really discovered through my work that very often the pelvic floor is the reactor. It's not the driver. And when we allow the autonomy and that empowerment piece of feeling like safe, feeling nurtured, feeling replenished, the nervous system component, that anchor, which filters into so many parts of their life outside of pelvic health, enables the pelvic health piece to actually come into focus in a different way. They probably still need a little bit of movement analysis. They probably still need some hands-on work. They probably still need definitely some education. But I find that when you anchor it back to that nervous system work, so many other things fall into place. And very often, I may not even need to do that internal exam. And the reason they came to see me to begin with has already started to shift. And when I discovered that, Amanda, very much like you, I felt anchored. I felt authentic. I felt like I was practicing in a genuine way that really anchored me back into those OT roots. So I agree with you completely. I'd love to hear what other people's experiences are, because this is just our experience, Amanda, right? This is just you and I sharing sort of our journey here. So let's see. Oh, great. We've got some wonderful comments coming in. So Susan, Lexi says, I love this way of doing things so much. I'm trying to approach decision-making this way in all aspects of life, not just work. Paying attention to my inner voice helps me to waste so much less time in analysis paralysis. Lexi, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Susan is joining us. She says, love it. Manual internal work is usually in my toolbox, but it's the last tool I use. Tiffany says, yes, this is why I love biofeedback. Give our clients control over their bodies. They feel empowered and can see what their internal muscles are doing. And then Joanna shares, I really appreciate this perspective, Amanda. My background is primarily with children and adolescents with intellectual disabilities, and I don't see alignment with internal work and consent for this group. Yet I have experienced great collaboration in promoting pelvic health autonomy with this population.
I love it. That's so beautiful. Yeah. And I think it ties.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Amanda, please.
No, I was just going to say how it ties so much to the topic today is that, I think because there isn't such a conversation of this out there, I mean, I know it's happening, but it's not as prevalent as that kind of PT world where I too grew up, I grew up as an OT, I suppose, in a PT clinic as well. And the modeling that I saw was, very biomechanical kind of approach. And I think that's where maybe the inner critic started to get really loud, because it was like, wait a minute, I have this inner knowing that I want to practice this way, or I have this desire to really support women, but I'm only seeing it performed in this way. And so then I'm like, is there something wrong with me? Am I doing it wrong? Is there something where I need to change? And so I think it's really great to get together and all communicate that, yeah, we're OTs and we see it this way. And yeah. For me, it just ties together so beautifully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd love to generalize that a little bit more and just say that whether it's about internal work or not internal work, or hands-on work versus not hands-on work, just kind of coming back to the authentic voice that you see pelvic floor therapy thriving under. So what is it that you feel compelled to do? So the very cool thing, often, let's be honest, it can often be very intimidating. There's not one way to practice pelvic floor therapy. there's your way. And so I think for me, when we talk, Amanda, what I feel very loud and clear intuitively and intellectually is just follow that inner voice, because it doesn't have to look like your mentors. It doesn't have to look like your colleagues. It doesn't have to look like a course you've taken, but that your client will thrive when you really step into what you feel is the most authentic way that you can practice. And I really saw that in my own practice, that when I did that, my clients' ability to reach their goals was so much faster. And I just felt so much more passionate about what I was doing. And so that alignment was a true dream.
Perfect. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say that that's kind of like a big takeaway from our conversation.
Yeah.
Jessica has added a comment. She says the shift when patients start to see what you can help them with as a pelvic floor OT and the possibility and increased quality of life is what it's all about for her.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love this conversation. I want to mention that Joanna Sieber was a guest on my podcast recently, where she talks all about her experience and her background working with the children and adolescents with intellectual disabilities, and how it really propelled her career forward to what she's doing now. So I'll make sure to throw a link into our amazing conversation. Spoiler alert, it was about theory, but it was about theory stepping outside of the realm of textbooks. So it's actually a fascinating conversation. Lexi is joining us with another comment. She said there was a recent IG post by Mara Podvi that you shared, Lindsey, that really hit the nail on the head with how OTs already have so much tools without having to do internal work. Yeah, that one actually just probably came out while we were doing this talk, Lexi. You are right on it. I love it. Amazing. Anything else, Amanda, that's on your mind that you want to share before we wrap up today's OT Empower Hour?
I think you kind of beautifully brought it together in your last comment, just that, bringing your authentic self really is what helps, I think, individuals shine, right? It doesn't have to look like anybody else. And I would agree with that sentiment. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that also can anchor us back into that courage piece of walking with fear and doing it anyway, because when it feels authentic to you, it just kind of enables you to get closer to seeing that goal, because it just is, we do it with less tension. We do it with greater ease. And so I love that. Amanda, I'm so thrilled that you are my guest today. Thank you for sharing and doing it scared and joining us today for this amazing conversation.
Thank you for the space, the honor. Yeah, truly. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Same time, same place next week for our next OT Empower Hour. If you have any ideas, topics that you want me to cover, I'm going to throw my email address in the comments. Reach out to me and let me know, because I want to keep bringing you the topics that you guys want to hear about the most.